With continued reports of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior dominating the headlines again this week, Colorado lawmakers are working on getting their ducks in a row. A meeting is set for December 15th to review workplace harassment policies and training for legislators and staff. Meanwhile, according to ColoradoPolitics.com, the Legislative Council's Executive Committee plans to bring in an independent consultant to review the current policies and make recommendations. David, are you confident that the legislature can find a way to monitor itself on these kinds of issues?
Well, let's see what happens. I think having an independent consultant is good. That it's always a good idea to have somebody with a fresh perspective who's not stuck in sort of the institutional lens on things. In terms of the Colorado accusations, all people, as a matter of human rights, and especially all Americans, are entitled to due process. And the legislature has a process for expelling members if they choose, for doing investigations leading up to that, and that process can go forward. Likewise, college students are entitled to due process before they're expelled or suspended. And it doesn't matter who the accused is, whether the accused is in a category of people you like or in a category of people you don't like. That's a universal right. And it's also, having been a prosecutor, it's also just a matter of common sense that when people make an accusation, often those accusations are true. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes they really are just different perceptions. And sometimes accusations are made up maliciously for all kinds of different reasons. And there is no group in the world that is exempt from the vice of making up false accusations. And that includes people of every racial category, people of every occupational category, and people of all sexes and genders and sexual orientations. So somebody who says, I always believe a woman accuser, is the equivalent of living in a flat earth world. Many women accusers tell the truth, some don't.
Eric, this whole idea of going to consultants, creating these different policies, seems like a bipartisan idea. There's not a whole lot of arguments against that. But nothing is ever that simple under the Golden Dome. What do you think is going to happen once we get into January?
I mean, I think it's a good idea. Hire a consultant, do some trainings, do some workshops, come up with new policies, come up with a new manual. All of that is good. But all of that in and of itself isn't going to do the trick. This is not a policy problem. It is a cultural problem, and it's not limited to the Colorado Capitol, but maybe the Colorado Capitol has been a little bit of a hotbed of it, and I think those of us who have done time under that dome historically sort of understand some of that phenomenon. But ultimately, speaking of flashpoints, which is a phrase I used to the earlier answer, obviously this is an incredible flashpoint in our society, our country at large, and that is going to change attitudes. It is going to change awareness. I'm struck by the distinction or the difference between how the private sector is handling this and obviously how it gets handled in the political sector. Private sector, Matt Lauer, news report, gone. Many other situations, Charlie Rose, news report, gone, etc. In the political sector, I mean, Roy Moore is still and now leading in the polls again in Alabama, Steve Lebsock, and he's entitled, per David's point, to stay and fight here in Colorado, but the charges look pretty substantial and pretty credible, and it's not going to have a happy ending for Mr. Lebsock by all indications. That's his right to stay and fight, but I would just wrap it up. I think in the political world, voters ultimately have to be the HR department, and voters are ultimately going to be the ones that are heard from and probably kick some of these people to the curb that are not otherwise opting to jump on the curb.
Penn, you're a former lawmaker. What do you feel about A, what's going on, and B, how, at least what we're hearing, how they're going to handle it?
I like the idea of bringing in an outside consultant. It can't hurt. These are policies that probably haven't been looked at for years, and so scrubbing them and getting a fresh take is probably the right thing to do. I disagree with Eric a little bit. I don't think this is just part of the legislative culture. I think this issue we're dealing with is it's a societal issue. That's why you're seeing it in the private sector and the public sector. The private sector can deal with it differently. If somebody misbehaves on the job, you fire them. It's a little bit different when someone's been elected into an office office, an allegation's been made, it's something theoretically they've earned, and you can't summarily take that from them because, you know, they're there in a representative capacity. I don't know if I necessarily want you yanking my state representative or state senator based on an allegation if it hadn't been founded yet, or we hadn't gone through some sort of process. So the process is important, and we need to go through that. But I think this is going to just make it a very, very interesting time for the 2018 legislative session, because, you know, a legislative body is a body of people, and part of it is personal relationships and how you deal with one another. And I think it's going to be a very stilted session where people are going to be dealing with each other in a very stiff and frozen kind of way. And it's going to be interesting to see how that impacts communication and ability to get things done. It was already tough enough rolling into an election year, but this may just be the icing on the cake.
Patty, wrap it up for us.
Well, I'm going to volunteer to be the independent consultant because here we are at this table, the only TV table in the entire country where I don't think a man has been booted for bad behavior. So I think I'm qualified to go to the legislature and just say, cut it out. This has been going on not just in politics, not just in private business, but in all culture for, generations, I mean, forever. But by 2017, if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, we are all in trouble. Don't touch, don't ask, don't act untowardly, be fair, be honest, don't play the power trip. I mean, just behave. We know what it means to behave now.